Hello, in this hard surface practice session we're going to be modelling some sort of storage tank. When I say tank, I don't mean the peel kind, I mean the kind that hold liquids, sort you get in factories and places like that. We'll be using booleans, so make sure you have the ball tool enabled and a hotkey. You're going to need an HDRI environment texture, download a free one online and set it up in the World Properties tab, and lastly the bevel shader that we'll set up as we go. Bear in mind, what we're making is essentially the high poly, so I won't be worrying too much about topology other than if it affects where I need to add loops, so we'll work with the silhouette in mind. So starting off with the cylinder with 64 verts, shade smooth, and this is quite a large tank. It's going to be the sort of tank you'd get in a sci-fi film that holds an alien of some sort. So we're adding all those loop cuts down the middle are to help support the geometry, because the booleans will make the shading on the cylinder crap unless you add extra support loops in. I'm going to add a loop on this cube is going to be the cutter. This support loop I've added here is to confine the bevel to that bottom portion there, because I'm going to bevel these edges. Whenever you're rounding out on a bevel, try and add an even number of segments. As a tip I learned from Josh Gambrell of Blender Bros, because then when you're removing edges, when you're doing the low poly, you end up with the right amount in the right places. It's obvious when you think about it, I just never thought of it until he pointed it out. I'll be using the brush version of the booleans most of the time, because you can then adjust the positioning so that you can get the best shading possible. It's not going to be perfect, and I'm not going to worry too much about it unless it's glaringly visible. Now I'm going to duplicate the cylinder and remove the boolean, so I've got an exact copy in the exact same place. Sorry if you can hear that in the background, someone's cutting trees outside. With this cylinder, I'm going to scale it down, Shift X to not do the X axis, and then this is going to be another boolean that we're going to minus away from that centerpiece. I'm going to leave the booleans active as long as possible. Okay, and that is the basic frame of the tank that we're making. Okay, next we're going to do another duplicate. And we're just going to scale this one down to fit slightly inside that frame that we cut out with the first boolean. And this piece is going to effectively be the glass that's going to fit on the outer portion. So in side view, with box select X-ray mode, I'm just going to delete some of the extra faces that we don't need on the edges, and the end pieces have gone as well, and that piece fits perfectly in place. We'll be giving that a glass shader later on. Okay, duplicate another cylinder. Duplicate and detach the end. We're just going to basically use this piece to make the end of the tank. Going to extrude this out, and then extrude again and scale it inwards. I'm going to inset it slightly. And extrude it in a small amount. What I'm doing here is I'm extruding and then right clicking to cancel, so it's extruded in place. And then in side view I'm going to scale it up so that it sits behind that lip that we've just made there, and move this part back. The reason for this is I want to make a part that basically sits inside that, but that will catch the bevel when we add the bevel shader later on. So in X-ray mode, I'm just going to loop select those faces. Shift D, duplicate in place. Flip the normals because they'll be facing the wrong way. And then we're going to extrude back slightly that edge. Actually, I forgot to separate that as a separate object, so I'm just going to do that now. Just going to isolate this piece, select all linked. Just change that to sharp, just in case it's not selecting all of it. I think it is. That's it, and separate by selection. Next we can take the other edge and snap that back to where we extruded the first part of the end portion of the tank. Just right click and N to fill that with the face. It's not entirely necessary, you won't see it, but it's just habit. And same on this inner part. I'm just going to select the loop there and add a face, and then inset it, scale it in, and then just extrude out this detail. This detail in the middle is basically echoing the same sort of shape that the end piece of the tank has to begin with. And just repeating it again, just one more. And when I scale it in, you can see the where it goes past the auto smooth angle, the shading kind of clips off and it becomes a hard edge. Okay, that piece is looking pretty good. I'm just going to mirror those across to the other side now. Okay, and just going to apply both those mirrors. Going to duplicate the original tank again now and isolate it. And now we're going to remove all the loop cuts from down the length of it, so we've just got the cylinder. Just going to remove the end ones and then delete it. Okay, with this piece what we're going to do is use it to make the stand that the thing is being held up in. So I've basically beveled two edge loops either end, and then beveled them again to make a strip of faces that I've then separated. Just going to delete that cylinder because we don't need that anymore. Don't need both sides of this, I could just work on one. And I'm just going to delete the bottom set of faces and then select these edges and extrude them down on the Z-axis. Remember to apply the scale just in case we've done anything, and then use the transform tools to snap those edges to 0 on the Z-axis. Bridge those across. Now we're going to add these edge loops and snap them to the bottom of the tank. Oh, actually, before I do that, I just want to add a solidify modifier. I can do that to 10 centimeters, going outwards, even thickness. Just going to move the whole thing up 10 centimeters now, like select all the pieces and just GZ 0.1, just to account for the thickness on the stand. Mirror that across. just leaving the mirror in place. I do normally apply them, as you've probably noticed. Much as a waste of time is, as it's just a habit that I've got into over the years for some reason. Just going to fill in that bit there, and then just select this, and I'm going to scale it on the x-axis, just to give it a bit of a different shape and a bit of variety. So as complicated as this piece may look at first glance, all of the big shapes are basically just cylinders with different things done to them, and almost all of the cuts are done by cubes that are just scaled to different sizes. On the leg part of this tank, I'm just adding a center loop cut so that I can snap this block into place. Then we're just going to scale it on the y-axis so it extends out past the curve. Scale it on the just move it down on the z-axis slightly. Okay, now with the bottom edges selected, I'm just going to bevel it. Press C to clamp so that the edges don't overlap, and then give it quite a few segments because I want this part to round out. Merge everything by distance just so it merges the ones in the middle. Shade smooth before booleaning, and then we're just going to do a difference boolean on that piece. And that's not worked for some reason. It shouldn't be anything to do with the mirror, so maybe it's the faces that are the wrong way around. Do I flip those? No, that's still not doing it. Let me just undo quickly. Let's put face orientation on. Oh, it's that piece. That piece is inverted for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why, because we made that from a cube. Yep, so we've flipped the faces. That should now boolean correctly. Yep, there we go. We just want to move the boolean above the mirror so we get it on both sides. And now where we've used the brush, we can move this and see what kind of looks we can get. I do quite like how it looks cutting into the base, but I feel like it makes it look less stable for what would be quite a heavy object if this is full of liquid. I'm going to move it to sort of the upper third of the tank. Looks pretty good there. Next I'm going to add some sort of notch in the top part of those bits that are rounding over. Just snap that into the correct place again and scale down this box. If you do any scaling in object mode, you have to apply the scale, otherwise your bevels and quite a lot of your operations will behave strangely. That's why you'll see me doing it quite often just to check that nothing's going to go wrong down the line. And use a brush difference again on this one, and then just see what we want to do with it. Just move it down slightly. Yeah, I think that looks quite good because it just looks like it's a notch in the design of the actual frame of the stand that it's sitting on. Then next I'm going to select this face here and just use snap the 3D cursor to that face. And what we're going to do is, if we change this over to 3D cursor, we can now rotate around where the cursor is. So I'm just going to duplicate the cutter, and then rotate it on the x-axis of the 3D cursor, 45 degrees. And we can put it just about there. Use that again, just use the boolean again to cut that piece out. Just collapse these, makes it a bit easier to move them all around. That's it, yeah, I want all the booleans above the mirror. Okay, and then I just want to add the y-axis to the mirror as well, so we get that cut on both sides rather than having to boolean both sides of it. Add in another cube. We're going to do another boolean operation. Actually, no. Let's use a cylinder for this one. We're going to take it 90 on the x-axis. Just going to decrease the amount of verts down to 32. Shade smooth, and then we can just snap that to the bottom of the stand. Into edit mode. I'll change back to bounding box because we don't need the 3D cursor at the moment. Scale that down a bit longer on the y-axis. And we're just going to cut that shape out of the bottom of the stand. So if you can see the cursor going a bit nuts there, it's the video editing software that I've got is called the screen recorder. Is a bit temperamental at times. Hopefully you can still see what I'm doing there. Okay, just going to mirror that cut across. Don't need these boolean cutters anymore because they've been applied. Same with that one. Just going to add another cube now. Feel like we need a bit of a detail on the side of the stand just to give it a bit of variation. It looks a bit too flat at the moment. So just going to move this out, scale it down a little bit. The good thing about using the brush boolean is you can play around with the shapes and get some happy accidents on. Sound like Bob Ross with his happy trees. Get some happy accidents on shapes you weren't necessarily going for, but you might find something that looks cooler than what you did have in mind in the first place. Okay. I scaled that the wrong way there, actually. Scale that out so that curves down. That's better. See, that's what I mean about like happy accidents, because it's not what it's not what I was intending to do at the side, but I think that actually looks better than what I was intending to do. I was just going to have a box cut out, go all the way across. Does that look better if it cuts all the way out? Yeah, it kind of does actually. So if we cut that off, and we can apply it all on that. I prefer using the ball tool menu to pop up because one, I don't have to remember all of the individual shortcuts for all the different effects, and two, sometimes I know that the cut I'm going to do is going to work, so I'll just use the top ones, and if I want to play around with the shape of it, I'll use the brush ones, and you can just apply it afterwards and just delete the cutter once you're done with it. Another cube, I'm going to cut out a portion through the a section through the middle of the stands here. Just apply the scale just before I do that. Just going to add a bevel there. See, like with this one, I can kind of tell that it's kind of the right size and shape for the stand cut out. I don't really need to use a brush boolean there. What I do want to do though is I do want to just widen the base of this stand slightly on the y-axis. So I'm just going to select those faces and then just scale them out. Not too much, just a little bit, just so it's a bit more sturdy perhaps. Okay, just going to widen that a little bit as well. Select the whole thing. Okay, that can just be removed, and that looks pretty cool. Okay, these inside edges here are looking a little bit unnatural, so they'd look natural if it was some sort of strap that went over the top, but I'm assuming this is, or I'm thinking of it in terms of this being some sort of large metal frame that this heavy tank sits in. So I'm just going to bevel those out. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a pipe coming out the end of the cylinder. And to do this, what I'm going to do is basically add a cube, get it into the right places, bevel the necessary corner, and then convert it into a curve so that I can get a perfect angle coming out of the tube. So just snapping that there. That's perfectly in the right place for that part. Just going to move that inside slightly. Then I want the bottom face, snap that to 0 on the z-axis, just by snapping it to the bottom of the frame. Okay, just going to select this edge and just give this a bevel. Don't want too many because otherwise the tube will clip through itself as it goes around the corner, so I don't want too many segments here, but enough to give it a nice sort of rounding out. Select those edges and separate by selection. Delete the box, don't need that anymore. This piece, we can just convert this into a curve and then give it a thickness. It looks quite narrow coming out of the main bit, so I might have it come out narrow and then thicken up. Just have it fill that area there where it's flat, and just want to increase the resolution as well. No reason for this to be low res at the moment. checking fill caps is off. I'm just going to convert that back into a mesh. I'm going to add a loop cut up here somewhere, and another up this end. I'm just going to scale those to 0 on the x-axis in case there's any slight angle in there. Then I need to make a few cuts up this end, just so it's got some room to insert. If I select this loop of faces, and then I can extrude along the normals, just extrude them in. Hoses and things like this normally have sort of connecting pipes. Just give that a bevel. Do the same on the other side. Just very slightly. Shade smooth. I actually want that piece in the middle there to be a separate object so that the parts around it catch the bevel when we add the bevel shader later on. So I'm just going to select all of that, separate by selection and isolate it. And if I go into X-ray mode and side view, I can just scale that along the x-axis slightly, just so it sits inside there. I'm just going to fill the ends of that. It's not really necessary, but again, just have it. Snapping the 3D cursor back to the origin, and then these pieces, I'm just going to extrude them back along the x-axis and fill a face in. Okay, that's it. On the other end of this tube, I want to extend this part out and make it look like it's coming out of another tank, so it's connected to something that's either feeding into the main tank or detracting from it. So just scale this out, Shift Z to ignore the Z axis. Just going to make that part much thicker. Okay, next I'm going to go on to the shading now. So I've split the view into shader editor on the right and shaded view of the 3D viewport on the left. I've got some default lights in the scene as well as the HDRI that we set up at the beginning. Just going to darken the colour straight away just so we can actually see what the bevel shader is doing when we set that up. So just search for a bevel shader and drop that in. Immediately turn the samples to 16. And if we zoom in, we can see what this shader's doing. It's rounding out these corners, these hard edges, but it's a bit too much, so we want to just reduce it down a little bit. About a 0.02, I think, is going to work well for that. Drop the roughness down so it catches a lot of highlights, and then see what it looks like with the metallic up. The amount of radius you use on the bevel shader will very much depend on the size of the piece that you're making. So 0.02 works for the size that those that stand is, but if this was a much smaller model, if it was only like a few centimeters big, that bevel would look massive, so you'd have to account for that, and it'd be like 0.0002 or something. Try out some different colours on here. No, actually, I think that needs to all be one colour. In fact, the whole tank really would be the same colour. I might change the stand later on to a different colour. Let's add that as that one. Just going to join those pieces together. There's no reason for them to be separate. And give them a different colour. I think what I might do with this piece is instead of using the principled BSDF, I might just delete that and then just use a glass shader instead. So you just type in BSDF in the search thing and it'll come with all of them, and then you just get the glass one. You can still use the normal, although I don't think you can actually see the edges of the glass anywhere, so it's not really necessary in this case. I'm just going to fiddle around with the values, see if I can find something I like now. It's quite low for the roughness. Just going to darken it down, see what that looks like. That definitely looks more glass-like than it did. Could have a sort of frosted glass. Maybe if I give it a bit of colour. Oh yeah, that's looking really good actually. That's I like the way that's popping out. Getting a lot of separation between the materials, having it like that. One thing in hindsight I've just remembered is that that glass is just one thin piece of polygons, so there's no thickness to it. I should have really added some thickness with a solidify modifier, just so you catch a bit of the internal refraction. Just going to see if that makes it any different. No, that don't look good. Again, a lot of the time it's just fiddling around with the values and finding what looks good. With a piece like this, you usually find that most colours for the coloured glass will look great. For the frame, dark stand with a light metal for the main tank will look good. You can, if you decide you need more materials, you can just click the number next to the materials at the top and then just change them into a completely different material. You can rename them as well up there. I normally, if it's a main project, I'll name them with usually the colour and the size of the bevel, sort of large, medium, or small. Just going to add in a plane for the floor there and scale it up. And I'm just going to need to give that a darker material so it's not completely washing out the scene, and drop the roughness so we get some reflections in there as well. And yeah, it's just from there it's just fitting around with it really. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you found this useful, please give me a subscribe. Thank you for watching and take care.